is a celebration observed in many countries on the 31st of October, the eve of the Western Christian feast of All Hallows Day. It begins the observance of All Hallowtide, the time in the liturgical year dedicated to remembering the dead, including saints, martyrs, and all the faithful departed. One theory holds that many Halloween traditions may have been influenced by ancient Celtic harvest festivals, particularly the Gaelic festival Samhain, which may have had pagan roots. Some scholars hold that Samhain may have been Christianized as All Hallows Day, along with its eve, by the early church. Other academics believe, however, that Halloween began solely as a Christian holiday, being the vigil of All Hallows Day. Halloween activities include trick-or-treating, attending Halloween costume parties, carving pumpkins into jack-o'-lanterns, lighting bonfires, apple bobbing, divination, playing pranks, visiting haunted attractions, telling scary stories, as well as watching horror films. In many parts of the world, the Christian religious observances of All Hallows Eve, including attending church services and lighting candles on the graves of the dead, remain popular, although elsewhere it is a more commercial and secular celebration. Some Christians historically abstained from meat on All Hallows Eve, a tradition reflected in the eating of certain vegetarian foods on this vigil day, including apples, potato pancakes, and soul cakes. Etymology. The word Halloween dates to about 1745 and is of Christian origin. The word Halloween means Saints' Evening. It comes from a Scottish term for All Hallows Eve. In Scots, the word Eve is even, and this is contracted to een. Over time, All Hallows Even evolved into Halloween, although the phrase All Hallows is found in Old English. All Hallows Eve is itself not seen until 1556. History. Gaelic and other Celtic influence. Today's Halloween customs are thought to have been influenced by folk customs and beliefs from the Celtic-speaking countries, some of which are believed to have pagan roots. Jack Santino, a folklorist, writes that, quote, "There was throughout Ireland an uneasy truce existing between customs and beliefs associated with Christianity and those associated with religions that were Irish before Christianity arrived," end quote. Historian Nicholas Rogers, exploring the origins of Halloween, quote, "Some folklorists have detected its origins in the Roman feast of Pomona, the goddess of fruits and seeds, or in the festival of the dead called Parentalia. It is more typically linked to the Celtic festival of Samhain, which comes from the Old Irish for summer's end." Samhain was the first and most important of the 4 quarter days in the medieval Gaelic was celebrated on the 31st of October through the 1st of November in Ireland, Scotland, and the Isle of Man. A kindred festival was held at the same time of year by the Brittonic Celts, called Caelan Gaff in Wales, Calan Gaff in Cornwall, and Calan Gaeaf in Brittany, a name meaning first day of winter. And before you say anything, I know I probably butchered those names. That's okay. It's Halloween. For the Celts, the day ended and began at sunset. Thus the festival began on the evening before 7th of November by modern reckoning. Samhain and Calan Gaeaf are mentioned in some of the earliest Irish and Welsh literature. The names have been used by historians to refer to Celtic Halloween customs up until the 19th century, and are still the Gaelic and Welsh names for Halloween. Samhain marked the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter, or the darker half of the year. It was seen as a liminal time when the boundary between this world and the other world thinned. This meant the the spirits or fairies, could more easily come into this world and were particularly active. Most scholars see the as degraded versions of ancient gods, whose powers remain active in the people's minds even after they had been officially replaced by later religious beliefs. The were both respected and feared, with individuals often invoking the protection of God when approaching their dwellings. At Samhain, it was believed that the needed to be... what is that word? Propagated to ensure that the people and their livestock survived the winter. Offerings of food and drink, or portions of the crops, were left outside for the The souls of the dead were also said to revisit their homes, seeking hospitality. Places were set at the dinner table and by the fire to welcome them. The belief that the souls of the dead return home on one night of the year and must be appeased seems to have ancient origins and is found in many cultures throughout the world. In 19th century Ireland, candles would be lit and prayers formally offered for the souls of the dead. After this, the eating, drinking, and games would begin. Throughout Ireland and Britain, the household festivities included rituals and games intended to foretell one's future, especially regarding death and marriage. Apples and nuts were often used in these divination rituals. They included apple bobbing, nut roasting, scrying, pouring molten lead or egg whites into water, dream interpretation, and others. Special bonfires were lit, and there were rituals involving them. Their flames, smoke, and ashes were deemed to have protective and cleansing powers, and were also used for divination. In some places, torches lit from the bonfire were carried sunwise around homes and fields to protect them. It is suggested that the fires were a kind of imitative or sympathetic magic. They mimicked the sun, helping the powers of growth and holding back the decay and darkness of winter. In Scotland, these bonfires and divination games were banned by the church elders in some parishes. In Wales, bonfires were lit to prevent the souls of the dead from falling to earth. Later, they served to keep away the devil. From the 16th century, the festival included mumming and guising in Ireland, Scotland, the Isle of Man, and Wales. This involved people going house to house in costume, usually reciting verses or songs in exchange for food. It may have originally been a tradition whereby people impersonated the she, or the souls of the dead, and received offerings on their behalf, similar to the custom of souling. Impersonating these beings, or wearing a disguise, was also believed to protect oneself from them. It is suggested that the mummers and geysers personify the old spirits of the winter, who demanded reward in exchange for good fortune. In parts of southern Ireland, the geysers included a hobby horse. A man dressed as a lair-ban, or white mare, led youths house to house reciting verses, some of which had pagan overtones, in exchange for food. If the household donated food, it could expect good fortune from the muck ola. Not doing so would bring misfortune. In Scotland, youths went house to house with masked, painted, or blackened faces, often threatening to do mischief if they were not welcomed. F. Marion McNeill suggests the ancient festival included people in costume representing the spirits, and that faces were marked with ashes taken from the sacred bonfire. In parts of Wales, men went about dressed as fearsome beings called gwrachod. In the late 19th and early 20th century, young people in Glamorgan and Orkney cross-dressed. Elsewhere in Europe, mumming and hobby horses were part of other early yearly festivals. However, in the Celtic-speaking regions, they were particularly appropriate to a night upon which supernatural beings were said to be abroad and could be imitated or warded off by human wanderers. From at least the 18th century, imitating malignant spirits led to playing pranks in Ireland and the Scottish Highlands. Wearing costumes and playing pranks at Halloween spread to England in the 20th century. Traditionally, pranksters used hollowed-out turnips or mangle wurzels, often carved with grotesque faces, as lanterns. By those who made them, the lanterns were variously said to represent the spirits, or were used to ward off evil spirits. They were common in parts of Ireland and the Scottish Highlands in the 19th century, as well as in Somerset. In the 20th century, they spread to other parts of England and became generally known as jack-o'-lanterns. Well, that's pretty spooky. Needless to say, there's plenty more there on the page. But I thought it would be a good way to start this spooky Halloween morning with a little bit of an introduction